But tonight, as I entered her throne room to find bodies on the floor and chaos reigning over Vel'Kari's once immaculate court, she told me that my transparent expressions had been a silent warning of their betrayal for 6 months, while she mocked me. Me. For 6 months the Queen mocked my human weakness, the way my face reddened when I was embarrassed, how my eyes showed my fear and disgust without reserve. The air was thick with tension when Daniel stepped into the grand chamber. The opulent decorations clashed horribly against the scene before him. Bodies on the floor, blood pooling around them like dark rivers cutting through marble tiles. His heart raced. He could feel it pounding in his chest as adrenaline coursed through him. He scanned the room for familiar faces, and was relieved to see some of his human colleagues huddled together at one end. But most disturbing were those whom he knew well, people who had been alive earlier that day. The Queen stood alone on her dais, a stark figure against the carnage below. Her silver skin glistened in the dim light, but there was no beauty to be seen, only exhaustion and horror etched into every line of her face. She met Daniel's gaze, unguarded for once, devoid of mockery. "Human," she commanded quietly from across the chamber. "Come here." Daniel approached with measured steps, avoiding stepping on any bloodied remains or dislodging fragile objects along his path. The Queen's voice echoed in his ears like a warning bell. As he neared her elevated platform where the throne sat empty behind her, several guards trained their weapons at him before lowering them after seeing who it was. He stopped just short of touching ground with the top step and bowed slightly from the waist. "Your Majesty." Her violet eyes were hard, but there was something else lurking within. Desperation? Anger? He couldn't be sure until she continued speaking, her words cutting through the stunned silence like a knife slicing into air. "Grand Vizier Krath attempted a coup d'etat." She paused, allowing that information to sink in before proceeding with cold precision. 30 of my closest advisors were involved. Daniel's stomach churned as his mind processed this revelation. 3 hours ago, Queen Seraphine said flatly, though it didn't sound natural on such lips used to control and poise. The Queen continued speaking without pause, her tone unemotional despite the horror playing out around them. "Everyone I trusted," she whispered harshly. "Every person who has served me faithfully since the beginning. All traitors." She turned to look directly at Daniel now, and he saw an intensity in those eyes that made his breath hitch. It was rare for her gaze not to be calculating or dismissive. "Except you," she said, voice barely above a murmur, as if speaking too loudly would shatter whatever fragile hold on reality she maintained. "The human I mocked for 6 months." Daniel blinked rapidly, but couldn't find words fast enough in the wake of shock and confusion. "Me?" he managed to croak out. Seraphine's lips twitched into something that might have been a laugh if her face hadn't held such weight behind it. She shook her head slightly, almost as though waking from some terrible nightmare. "You," she affirmed harshly, looking down at him with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read yet desperately wanted to understand. "Every time they plotted, I saw your disgust, your discomfort." Daniel felt his cheeks flush as memories flooded him. Moments of being singled out by Seraphine in council meetings where he couldn't suppress reactions to her barbs or the schemes unfolding before their eyes. The one who showed emotions, no matter how hard he tried not to. She pointed towards the bodies strewn across the floor, and then back at herself. "Perfect masks all around me. Except for you. Your transparent humanity," she breathed against a sudden crackle of emotion visible but unspoken. "Warned me and I did not hear it." Her fingers touched his face gently now, her silver hand cold against his heated skin, a gesture so unexpected from this queen that Daniel felt momentarily paralyzed by its intimacy. "You flinched," Queen Seraphine said quietly. "Grimaced, every emotion clear on your open face." She took a shuddering breath, drawing back her hand, and looking at him with an intensity he had never before seen in those proud violet eyes. "And I mocked you for it," she whispered almost reverently, as though the realization cut deeper than any blade. "For 6 months." Daniel's heart was hammering so hard against his ribcage that it felt like a drumbeat drowning out everything else. He swallowed heavily and forced himself to meet her gaze squarely. "Your Majesty," he began, but faltered under the weight of those eyes boring into him, searching for something amidst all this chaos. "You are the only one left who hasn't lied or betrayed me." He nodded slowly, not daring to look away now that he saw a truth reflected back at him through this woman's pain. His open humanity wasn't weakness, it was strength when everything. The palace was in lockdown, its once bustling halls now eerily quiet and empty, save for scattered guards who patrolled anxiously. Queen Seraphine's expression shifted once more, pain mixed with fierce clarity blooming there as she seemed finally to see what had been hidden from view beneath layers of emotional control and mockery. "Daniel," she corrected softly. Daniel Cross found himself wandering through these silent corridors, his thoughts racing as he grappled with the magnitude of what had transpired just hours earlier. Seraphine's chambers were a stark contrast to the chaos outside. They were secluded, calm, and isolated from any immediate threats. Yet even here, in her private sanctum, she could not escape the lingering echoes of betrayal that haunted every room within Vel'Kari territory. Daniel pushed open the door gently as he entered. Queen Seraphine was sitting on the floor amidst a scattering of papers and broken furniture. She looked up when he stepped inside, her silver skin now pale with fatigue, white hair disheveled around her face, and met his gaze with eyes that mirrored the uncertainty etched into every line of her body. "I do not know who is loyal," she whispered softly, voice barely above a murmur, as if speaking too loudly would shatter whatever fragile hold on reality she maintained. Daniel approached cautiously and knelt beside her where he found her sitting cross-legged amidst the remnants of an overturned chair. Her perfect composure was gone now. In its place were signs of vulnerability that made his heart clench painfully within him. "I do not know who is lying," Seraphine continued, almost to herself as much as to Daniel. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and she let out a bitter laugh tinged with self-loathing. "I spent 100 years perfecting the art of reading faces," she admitted heavily, her voice breaking slightly. "And I read nothing." She shook her head almost in disbelief, staring down at where her fingers gripped the floor tiles tightly, as if they alone held all that remained steady and true. Daniel sat beside her without hesitation, matching his posture to hers on this makeshift seat of stone and broken wood. On any other day, he might have felt intimidated by such proximity to royalty, but today seemed different somehow, more intimate than ever before. "You can trust me," Daniel said quietly yet firmly, meeting her gaze directly with eyes that dared not hide their concern. Seraphine's head snapped up sharply at his words, disbelief clear in the way she stared back at him. "The one I mocked? The one I humiliated for sport?" She laughed bitterly again, but there was no humor in it this time. Only recognition and a heavy dose of self-recrimination that made her eyes sting. Daniel nodded solemnly, despite the weight pressing down on them both. "Yes," he affirmed gently, taking another breath before speaking further. "You have been studying my emotions for 6 months. You know every expression I make." His voice was steady as his hand reached out to rest lightly over hers where it lay upon the floor, a small gesture of comfort and assurance that spoke volumes in this moment. "Every other person in your court wears a mask you cannot read." Seraphine's eyes flickered back up to meet his then, processing what she heard as if trying desperately to wrap her mind around the implications of trusting this human who had been nothing more than an object of amusement just days ago. "I cannot hide from you," he reiterated softly, but with unyielding resolve. "You are the only one," he insisted softly but with conviction. that I can actually see." She remained silent for long moments after that, long enough for Daniel's hand atop hers to warm despite their cool surroundings. Then finally she spoke, breaking her silence with a tone thickened by exhaustion and an underlying layer of disbelief. "This is insane," Seraphine murmured, almost inaudibly. Trusting him felt absurd, yet the alternative seemed even more untenable under current circumstances. Her eyes flashed with understanding now, realization dawning amidst all her despair, and she stood abruptly, then offered him her hand without further preamble. "I'm about to place my throne in the hands of someone I spent 6 months humiliating." Daniel took a deep breath as he accepted her proffered hand, allowing her help up from his kneeling position on the floor. Daniel's lips twitched almost into something akin to a smile, but he kept it restrained, knowing that this moment called for gravity rather than levity. "More insane than trusting the people who could?" he asked rhetorically and pointedly. "I have been called worse than humiliated," Daniel replied evenly, but with an undercurrent of determination. Seraphine's lips twitched once more, almost into that ghost of a smile, but she didn't quite manage it fully this time. "This is either the wisest decision I've ever made or the most foolish," she observed quietly, her tone reflecting both doubt and hope entwined together. He squeezed her hand in reassurance before releasing it gently. "Probably both," he agreed softly yet firmly, as if sealing an unspoken pact between them formed amidst this wreckage of deceit. She then led him towards her council chamber, where they could begin working on reclaiming control over what remained of her empire, starting by trusting someone who never stopped showing his true self amidst all these perfect masks and hidden agendas surrounding them. Weeks turned into months as Daniel became Seraphine's right hand in rebuilding her fractured empire. Seraphine's laughter was short but brokenly real, the first honest sound she had made since the betrayal. "Probably both," she echoed with a hint of relief mingled through its jagged edges. Though he did not sit officially beside her on the throne, his presence was unmistakable. Every meeting began and ended after consulting him. His sharp intellect and uncanny ability to read faces made him invaluable. His openness had become a beacon of truth amidst Vel'Kari's perfect masks. One morning, as they convened with military leaders and advisors in her grand council chamber, the atmosphere buzzed thickly under layers of tension. Seraphine took her place at the head of the expansive table, while Daniel stood respectfully to one side, his eyes scanning each face for any hint of insincerity or betrayal. General Aaron rose first, a formidable figure with silver armor and an imperious air about him. "Your Majesty," he began formally, but his voice held a note of urgency that did not escape Daniel's discerning gaze. "The rebels are gaining strength in the southern territories. We must launch a military offensive to crush them before they threaten our heartlands." Daniel's expression flickered with concern and distrust at Aaron's words, a combination Seraphine immediately noticed. She raised an eyebrow towards her human advisor, who merely nodded subtly. His face spoke volumes of caution. "General," she replied slowly, "while I understand your apprehension for the safety of Vel'Kari lands, we must consider all options before committing to such drastic measures." Her voice was calm, but firm. Aaron's expression tightened briefly at her refusal, but he did not argue further. The meeting continued with other advisors suggesting various strategies and trade agreements. Each time Seraphine sought Daniel's reaction, finding solace in his honest expressions, approval here, doubt there, as she weighed their words. When advisor Alara proposed a lucrative trade deal that could stabilize Vel'Kari's economy but risked political backlash from neighboring nations, Daniel's face lit up with interest and approval. As time went on, the pattern repeated itself. Seraphine observed Daniel's reactions to guide her decisions while he watched every face in turn, noting who shifted uncomfortably when their words were questioned or who remained impassive, despite being caught in lies. "Accept it?" Seraphine, decided after observing his response closely. The agreement was signed shortly thereafter and proved immensely beneficial for Vel'Kari's recovery efforts. Weeks passed and whispers began circulating through Vel'Kari courts about the human advisor whose influence over Queen Seraphine had grown exponentially. Some said Daniel enchanted her with his emotional transparency, a trait she once mocked as weakness but now saw as strength. Others speculated darkly that he was a spy using her vulnerability to manipulate their empire. Daniel heard these whispers and felt them cut deeply, every word slicing into the pride of being seen clearly for who you are by those around you. He could not hide his hurt or frustration from Seraphine when she noticed him watching the court with narrowed eyes. "They say I've enchanted you," he snorted sarcastically one day as they walked through palace gardens. She paused, turning to face him fully under the shadow of ancient trees, where sunlight filtered through leaves like gold dust scattered across their path. "Do not let them fool you," Seraphine replied firmly, but gently. Daniel shook his head, frustration evident in his features, even as he tried to maintain composure. "With what? My inability to play poker?" His voice was laced with bitterness and self-deprecating humor. She moved closer until her breath brushed against Daniel's ear, her tone low but commanding. "They do not understand that in their world of masks, the one genuine face is more powerful than any weapon." He turned to meet her gaze squarely, and saw something shift within those violet depths, acknowledgement and sorrow entwined. Seraphine's eyes softened for a moment before hardening again into resolve. "You mocked me for showing emotion," he said quietly. She nodded reluctantly, her expression grave but sincere. "I did. And I was wrong." Her hand reached out gently, brushing against his cheek in a rare show of tenderness from their otherwise formal relationship. It felt electric and intimate all at once. The simple act spoke louder than words ever could about what she now saw in him. Seraphine's lips curved into an almost shy smile as her eyes searched Daniel's face for any sign of reciprocation or dismissal, finding instead a mix of confusion mixed with determination. A familiar sight by now. "Your weakness saved my throne," she whispered reverently, "and your transparency saved my life." In that moment, everything seemed to crystallize between them. Years spent mocking him, reduced to dust beneath the weight of truth and trust forged from chaos. He looked at her then, eyes wide with surprise, and perhaps even a touch of awe in the discovery of just how far he had come. "You were so lonely," she murmured softly now, almost reverently as if speaking aloud truths buried deep inside herself for centuries. Daniel's face softened into understanding. His own hand reached up to gently cover hers, where it still rested lightly on his cheek. Daniel blushed under her gaze. The emotion, clear as day in the grand hall of Vel'Kari, was a sea of silver and gold, shimmering under the soft glow of floating luminescent orbs that cast gentle shadows across intricate carvings in the marble walls. "I know." Seraphine laughed then, a sound that was not mocking but filled with a rare lightness and gratitude. "They say your confusion is adorable," she commented playfully, referring back to those who doubted him. The air hummed with tension as representatives from every corner of the empire gathered to witness what would be announced today, a declaration of new leadership, an unbreakable bond between a human and their queen. Queen Seraphine stood at one end of the hall, her violet eyes scanning over the assembled courtiers, each face hiding secrets or betrayals. Daniel Cross stood beside her, his tired brown eyes reflecting every emotion that flickered across the room, a mixture of curiosity, disbelief, and outright disdain. "Your Majesty," General Aaron stepped forward, bowing deeply before Seraphine. "It is an honor to see you today." But there was a tension in his voice, unspoken questions lingering beneath the surface. Seraphine nodded briskly but did not acknowledge the general's words further. She turned her gaze back toward Daniel, who watched with wide eyes as she raised her hand to signal for silence. A hush fell over the hall. Murmurs died down into a deafening quiet. 6 months ago, Seraphine began in a clear voice that carried across every inch of the vast space. I mocked this human for his weakness. She paused, and everyone's eyes snapped toward Daniel as she spoke directly about him. His cheeks flushed slightly, but he stood tall beside her, unwavering under the scrutiny. For his inability to hide his emotions, Seraphine continued, glancing at Daniel with an expression that softened briefly before resuming its regal composure. I mocked a flaw I never understood was actually a strength. The murmurs resumed. Some courtiers whispered among themselves while others watched intently as this confession unfolded. Today, she went on firmly, her voice ringing through the hall like crystalline bells, is not about mockery, but about truth. She turned to face Daniel fully now. While I was laughing at his transparency, everyone with perfect masks around me were plotting my destruction. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered nobles as Seraphine's words sank in. Advisor Ilara shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, glancing sideways towards Daniel, who stood beside Seraphine with a face that showed every thought and feeling. He could not hide his reactions, she continued, her eyes meeting each member of the court one by one. His face screamed warnings. I was too arrogant to hear. She turned back to Daniel now, placing an elegant hand over his, where it rested at his side. A murmur ran through the crowd. Many faces shifted with a mix of surprise and skepticism. The court's masks may be impenetrable, but Daniel Cross, my royal consort, is a truth I can always see. Shock rippled through Vel'Kari like an electric current. It was impossible to look away from this declaration of trust given by Fate. Proud queen to a human who had been seen as weak. I placed my throne in his hands because he is the only one here who has never deceived me, Seraphine said firmly. Anyone here thinks emotion is weakness. She raised her voice, ice in her tone. Let them challenge him. But her eyes softened slightly now as they turned back towards Daniel. She took his hand publicly then, their fingers intertwined, and Seraphine squeezed gently before releasing just enough so that he could stand beside her properly once more. Today I formalize what has been true for weeks, she announced, lifting her chin proudly. Daniel Cross is my royal consort, my closest advisor, the reader of faces I cannot see. A ripple went through the crowd, a mix of awe and disbelief, and murmurs rose again as Seraphine paused long enough to let it sink in. She turned to Daniel then with an almost shy look on her face, a rare emotion that softened all edges around them. Yes, came Daniel's soft reply, even though everyone could see it written across every line of his face, a mix of fear for what lay ahead mixed together tightly with honor, overwhelming emotion, and a clear affection that Seraphine saw easily now without needing words or translation. Will you accept? Daniel's eyes widened at first, caught off guard by the intimacy of this public moment, but then filled quickly with understanding and acceptance. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his own hand in response to hers. Yes. Seraphine's smile was small, but genuine, as she turned back to the assembled courtiers once more, her mask fallen away in this moment, shared openly between them. She leaned forward slightly then to place an intimate kiss on Daniel's cheek. It was a clear declaration of trust and affection for all eyes to see. And when she pulled back, there was no need for words. His joy shone brightly across his features without needing any translation or decoding at all. In this court of liars, Seraphine proclaimed finally, with the quiet confidence born out of hard-earned wisdom, these past months of turmoil and rebuilding. He is truth. And in that moment, standing shoulder to shoulder before an entire empire, they both knew exactly what it meant, that her weakness had become strength, his transparency a shield against deceit. She turned back to Daniel once more then with those violet eyes, searching him deeply before speaking again.